Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and with me today I have John Murrieta, Bobby Ridge, and Dr. Bill Andrews of Sierra Sciences. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here today. We are an international party, even though we are also the U.S. Transhumanist Party, in the sense that we are open to individuals from all over the world as long as they're capable of holding a political opinion and they agree with our three very broadly framed core ideals. So right now, about 70% of our members reside in the United States, and about 30% of our members are allied members, which either are in the United States but are not eligible to vote in U.S. elections, though they still may vote in our internal elections within the U.S. Transhumanist Party, or they reside in other countries. And we have a substantial presence of allied members in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in India, as well as spread out through a large number of other countries on virtually all continents. We don't have any in Antarctica yet, but who knows what the future might bring. You can go to transhumanist-party.org. In any case, any thoughts from any of you?
I find it really easy to find a transhumanist now on like social media, even in person. And I think one of the main problems is people think that if they're from another country that they can't become a member. And really that's not the case. We allow contributions from anyone around the world. We don't necessarily discriminate. So I think it'd be a really good idea to let people know that that's not necessarily the case, that you have to be a U.S. citizen to become a member.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that I think is the explanation as to why the growth is slow is because most people don't know what the word transhumanist means. But in reality, 90% of everybody on the planet are transhumanists. They don't know it because they don't know what the word means. But it's just actually making us live better. That's all it is.
I think this growth, it will accelerate. It's just getting started. And my experience so far, what I've noticed online and posting, is that there is a demand or a hunger for this kind of technology, this kind of science, and people, with all the other stuff out there, they see this and it speaks to them. So I think that once we get more and more out there, people will start to realize how important and how much they too enjoy this stuff. Because I didn't know I was a transhumanist before, but as I learned about the process, what you guys are about, and yeah, it's one of those things.
It's really obvious once you actually comprehend it. I think there's a lot of like taboos and just great lack of understanding of what it is. And it's really easy for people to say, like, what about overpopulation? And they'll just instantly discount all of transhumanism. And there's little arguments that people just can't get past because they haven't studied it. And so it makes sense. There's a lot of science there to study, so it makes sense that a lot of people don't know about it yet.
Yeah.
Science is very mainstream
I agree.
in general.
Or they'll use those, like he says, those arguments as almost like blockades to not even think further. It's like, oh, overpopulation stuff. Like, well, how can we do it in a way that wouldn't do that? They says, nope, that's it, in the game. I don't want to talk. What's on TV?
Yes, I think you're correct. The roadblocks to more people becoming involved with the transhumanist movement are generally fairly basic, either a lack of awareness or these impulsive fallacies, yes, which are fairly easy to debunk if one has even a minute to engage in a discussion. But virtually all of the arguments that I've encountered against life extension the overpopulation argument, the boredom argument, the you're always going to just keep getting more decrepit argument, also known as the Tithonus era, where you're going to make dictators live forever, or
forever Trumpeton.
or you need to throw out the old people and make room for the new to have fresh ideas.
Be born ever.
Yes, but if you have a minute with a person and that person has a fairly open mind while still using critical reasoning, you're going to be able to overcome those roadblocks.
Really basic arguments.
Right. I think also we do have an opportunity with the term transhumanism because it is not yet to the point where 50% of the population or a similar critical mass of the population even is aware of the term. So we can still essentially control how that term is received by the general public. Some people, even within our movement, have alleged that, oh, this is too controversial a term. I disagree with that. I think this is actually the most promising term to carry across the message that through science and technology and rationality, life can be dramatically improved from its current condition, just as throughout history it has been improved. Certainly our lives today are better in numerous ways compared to the lives of our ancestors, and longer by a factor of 4 or 5 compared to our Paleolithic ancestors. So we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go, and that is the message of transhumanism. The message of transhumanism is also we can get there, and we can get there by means of applying our reasoning faculties and deploying technologies that improve the human condition. So that's essentially the second core ideal of the US Transhumanist Party, to create a societal, cultural, and political atmosphere that is informed and animated by reason, science, and secular values. And that would result in our species essentially being science-based in the way decisions are made. And unfortunately today, many decisions are made based on irrational considerations, based on people's yes, identity politics, people's range of the moment desires,
emotion.
Yes, emotion, perceived self-interest, which is really short-term self-interest as opposed to thoroughly considered long-term enlightened self-interest, which often leads to very different decisions being made. And we seek to influence not just the tools and gadgets that people have available or the lengths of their lives, although those are critically important for everything else to arise, but also essentially how daily life is conducted, how people think about the world, how they decide, what they take into account when they decide. All of that is extremely important, and I think we need to make progress on all of these fronts simultaneously. It's not the case that we can hold back in one area and wait for something else to happen. All of these advances, both technological and cultural, need to occur in parallel and reinforce one another. So I'm very glad about the work that you're doing. And John, you've made a very important point, and that is a lot of people's time is short, whether for legitimate reasons like they need to work to support themselves and their families, or frivolous reasons like they succumb to a sea of distractions. And unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of our hyper-connected technological information age is that it is very easy to become distracted, and it is very easy to become a victim of information overload. So to have resources that can be relied upon, that can distill important information and call it to people's attention, is of increasing significance now, even as compared to a few years ago. I would also say overcoming that basic awareness problem is extremely important, because day to day sometimes people don't even know what advances are happening in research facilities. People don't know, for instance, about breakthroughs that are being made to reverse disabilities in many people, and enable people who have been paralyzed to walk again. So, John, I know you've been doing a lot of research into this area. What are some of the findings that are particularly impressive in your view?
Glad you asked. There's possibly 3 that are going for if we're talking about restoring paralysis and spinal cord injuries or other disabilities or diseases. The first one is the obvious, the most ideal would be stem cells. And we're not talking embryonic or bone marrow, we're talking mesenchymal, which is umbilical. The problem with embryonic is you put them in the site you want them to grow into the right cell, a nerve cell or a bone cell. But those ones, sometimes it's hard to regulate their growth. So they become the wrong, like in a nerve cell, they become a bone or a liver cell or a cancer cell. Those ones, they don't work that well. But we found with mesenchymal that these ones, when they're ejected in the site, they become the cells that are needed. That's what's happening in Panama right now. I'm not too knowledgeable about that one, but that would be the most ideal because that's rejuvenated medicine. The second one, which is implants. This is what's really cool. These are what's called epidural stimulator. An epidural stimulator goes a little bit below the skin on the spinal column, essentially in the spot where your injury line is, where the signal can't get transferred. It's a little, 2 cords go on your spinal cord with a little battery on the side, and the battery gives a few little millivolts from a switch that you have, a little button, and that helps your body complete the signal. They're just finishing up clinical trials. They found that they have people stand and bear weight as well as like use their abdominals and take like a step or two, but we're still in the very early steps. They can't run, they can't jump, but the amount of progress that has been made in such a short time on a condition that we thought was forever, it's so enlightening because it's showing that something that's paralyzed, which you think permanent, now just means wait a little longer and we'll have something for you. And then I think those first 2 are really good, but there's also exosuits, which is another one. That's more of probably a capitalistic market favorable thing because they'll like, oh, I do exosuit better than you, and they'll compete by making better exosuits. And that would be good for, not just me, but paras and stuff like that who have just their legs just need like better walking abilities. But it doesn't just stop with people with disabilities. What's really cool about exosuits, other than military applications and carry more weights, is in industries. People are able to hold saws up longer because the thing is helping them bear the weight. Or search and rescue, they're able to actually lift up rubble, carry people, and without them wearing out longer. So it increases. It doesn't just restore movement in disabled. It increases the functionality in the able.
Yes. Absolutely. Indeed, I think the exoskeletons really highlight the possibilities of transhumanism beyond just restoring humans to what we would consider today the normal or default healthy state, but also in terms of facilitating human enhancement, abilities that we today wouldn't have, like the ability to lift a 1,000-pound weight. Unless we are champion weightlifters, we wouldn't be able to do that. But with an exoskeleton, this may be within the range of a child's abilities in a generation.
That's one of our goals on our YouTube channel is to review like an exoskeleton or some self-driving car for John, or a deep spinal stimulator, because that'd be so amazing to see John for the first 20 to 40 videos in a wheelchair, bound to it, but then 40 videos later he's standing. I think that'd be get some views.
Yes.
I'd like to get my own exoskeleton too.
Me too.
Absolutely. And they can get upgraded with time because
they're getting really good right now.
Right. It's a fairly non-invasive type of enhancement in the sense that in a few years, if the technology advances, one can just replace an existing exoskeleton with a new one. Probably that would not require surgery. It wouldn't require anything that has the risk of unpleasant side effects.
I was going to say there was one other one I was talking about with regards to the spinal cord. Is there's one where they have an implant like in your brain, and then it goes to a receiver on the other end of your spinal cord past the injury line. So it takes that and goes that way.
That was a signal, right?
Yeah, like a signal, like a relay. So it goes from your brain, and then the relay is below your injury point and completes the signal.
They completely severed a primate's spinal cord, and supposedly the primate could walk again.
Interesting.
With signaling.
Was this wireless between the
Yeah, wireless signaling. It's crazy. What do you dead zone flop? Are you out of batteries? There's tons of really interesting things. But you do the exosuit, you take up the metal bar like right here on the side of your arm. Just imagine once it's just going to be in your arm. Mm-hmm. Or I saw a movie recently called Upgrade, and it has this guy in it who gets turned into like me, quadriplegic. But then he gets this chip in the back of him. It's called STEM. Get it? And he puts it in the back of his head, and now he's able to walk, move, and stuff. And then
It's like an AI.
it's like an AI, and then it talks to him. It's a really cool movie, but it's kind of like that, just cool new. Like eventually it'll be stuff like that, just a simple implant, and you'll be because in the future they have guys who have they literally convert their hand into a gun. So literally right here, they load up shotgun shells and fire out of their hand. But it's all about the future and transhumanism and stuff, because it shows that they have automatic driving cars. And also, it's one guy, one has these, a gun against the guy, and the guy breathes on him. When he breathes little nanoparticles, and it goes into the guy's brain and just destroys him. But it was kind of a little nihilistic view. Anyways, it was really cool.
This movie you were talking about, Upgrade,
Yeah,
is that available on Apple TV or
it was just in theaters,
Netflix?
so it'll be up there. But it's really cool because it shows it's a little bit of the future and how he gets his ability back. I was like, oh, that'll be me one day. But then he's getting his butt kicked. At one point, he's like, do you want me to assume control? He's like, yes, take control. And so he lets the AI take full control of his body, and he becomes Bruce Lee. And the AI just gets to fight better. Like imagine self-driving cars once they're able to make all these quick movements. It would be nothing for them. For us, it's Batman.
So it would be interesting for someone to watch this film and write an analysis of it from a transhumanist standpoint.
Yeah, definitely, because there's several different points about it. Self-driving cars, nanotechnology, implants. The funniest thing is when I was in that theater, it was just two other guys behind me, and so I was ranting, dressed. Yeah, that's for me. And the guys behind me were laughing.
It sounds like a great promotional movie for the Transhumanist Party.
Yeah, and also it's a good one for people who just have spinal cord injury because it actually, the guy plays it really well. Because I don't have dexterity in my hands, so he really does the movement like that really well, showing that that's how it is when you're a quad. And also him having the wheelchair and also having similar stuff in the house as I do. So it's very they captured it really well for an action movie. It was really interesting, but it was good, inspiring.
Indeed. So now my next question for you, John, and this is a hypothetical one. Let's say that somebody were to offer to give you a robotic body, like a full body prosthetic, and let's say you had complete assurance that it would work, but you would look like C-3PO for at least a while.
For at least a while.
Yes, and you would still have your existing mind and capabilities. C-3PO can walk around and function autonomously, essentially. Would you accept the offer?
Well, I can annoy my friends even more than usual. I think I would, because I've already been through quite a lot, and people think it's so foreign to be in a robot body, but it's not that bad. If I choose death or this, I choose this, man. I mean, I'm still mostly here, but I have no function of this below. I barely have function in my hand. I'm mostly ahead. And yet my quality of life is really good. I used to have some rough times, but one thing about once you've lost a lot, you start to realize what's really important. Not stuff, not possessions, not material, relationships with friends, family, good health. You start appreciating the more simple stuff. So, they say it'd be weird to be in a robot body, but it's well, how do you know? It's not that bad, honestly. I'm already halfway there, and so far, it's not terrible.
Yes, and one observation I think that is important to make is you're already the beneficiary of technologies that could be considered transhuman.
Yeah, you make a really good point, Gennady. I did research on spinal cord injury, and in World War II, they weren't measured in years, they were measured in weeks, man, because they couldn't stop the inflammation, and the inflammation would kill them. And then even in the 60s and 70s, maybe a couple decade or two after that, but only until recently, the last 10 years, I lived pretty much the exact same life expectancy as other people, minus at the most 10 years. But that's all due to science and technology.
Absolutely.
Nothing else, nothing else has improved in our society other than, the only thing difference between then and now is we've gotten better at science and technology. Why? Okay, so when I went off the jump, I landed on my head. I had my buddy who was right there. I was like, I can't feel my legs. Can you help me up? Lucky he was trained to be a firefighter, and he knew all about first medic. He's because I can't feel it. Dude, I can't help you up. Because my C1 was cracked in 3 places. So if he lifted me up and I fell down again, it probably would have broke, and I was dead. And so, But because he learned it, he was able to not move me. And then ski patrol comes up, put him on this long, hard thing, so his spine doesn't do. Then how they get me down the mountain? Technology, fast. And then how they get me to the hospital, to the chopper. And it's all about timing right there. If I take an ambulance, I could have died on the way, but because we had the technology to stabilize me and the technology to get me over that fast speed, I'm still alive today, as well as the technology of the medicine that keeps me alive in the hospital. Only because of our advancement in science and technology am I alive this day and continue to breathe and talk to you. It's very profound, and that's why I've really become so interested in this. I've had a couple of years of apathy and hard times. I mean, the world, nothing can break you down like the world and your mind, I found. It's been really hard for me to find something to truly believe in. I guess having midlife crisis or existential crisis, trying to figure out what's good, what's worthwhile doing in this world. And for me, it's finally, I was going to be a teacher, want to teach science because I think we need more scientists in the world because we have a lot of problems coming up. And we need to get these kids knowing science so they can help fix some of our problems and our foreparents' problems. And so that's the best way. So that's why I'm really glad doing this with Bobby now, is it's something, because I'm going to go back in my master's in biology, become a professor, but in the meantime, I get to work on this, keep my mind sharp. And it's something that I really believe in. I really believe in this stuff, and I like it a lot, and I feel like my efforts aren't being wasted, because I told Bobby before, I used to post stuff on this on Facebook, or I'll tell my buddies about it, or random people, and no one seemed to, no one cared about it. I thought it was important, so it kind of brings you down, okay, maybe just don't share your good news, or just talk about, sports and TV. But then I finally found the right crowd of people, and they're receptive to this. I'm on Instagram now, and I have 150 followers, and I haven't even posted even that much, but people are really receptive to what I post, and I put my heart and soul into it, because I believe in it. And so it's been a very good process, and so this has been something that's been very important to me, because I live it, I need it, the world needs more of it, and I believe I can do it.
And that is extremely inspiring, John. I think this really is at the core of what transhumanism is about. It is about making life better for specific people. And to a large extent, we are already beneficiaries of it, but we can see so much more that can be done, and so much more that's on the horizon. And I'm certainly grateful that technology has enabled you to be with us here today, and hopefully in the future it will enable you to walk again, it will enable you to have abilities beyond any human today.
Yes, I'm not a spiritual or religious guy, but they always say, God only gives you as much as you can handle, or there's the one that says, there's a reason you're still here. There's a reason, there's something you got to do, and as you said, helping people, I think it's one of the most important things we can do is help each other, or help each other live healthy, long lives. But,
Yes, and you spoke also to the importance of having a community of individuals who recognize these possibilities and who support one another in pursuing them. Essentially, to give ourselves the acknowledgement that as individuals, we're not the only ones who have these aspirations. In fact, these aspirations are fairly widely shared. We just need to connect all of the people who share them. Sometimes that's a challenge. People do have their own lives, and social networks are extremely fragmented and becoming increasingly so. So how do we bring more people together? Organizations like the Transhumanist Party are the best way to do that. And in order to do that, we also need media that effectively communicate the message.
I was watching a video about, I eventually got off all social media because it just became memes and jokes to me. And the only reason I got back on is because of this guy. And I've read this, and it's a good way to phrase it, and that's use social media as a platform for your message.
Yes.
Don't use it to live off or to look for attention. Use it as a platform to just, all right, this is cool, I'm going to send it to other people so they send it to other people. It's not all about you, It's there's someone said that if you do the right thing, no one knows you've done anything at all. So stop searching for attention and just do the right thing. Or there's a quote that says, a lot more progress would get done if people would just not get so caught up with who gets credit for it.
Yes, indeed. We ultimately should care about advancing the well-being of the human species, advancing knowledge, advancing good outcomes, and ultimately that will essentially rebound in the form of benefits for all of us, but we don't always know how that will happen or exactly when that will happen. Nonetheless, a rising tide lifts all boats. So
Yes,
as humanity progresses, so do we. We have always in these Enlightenment salons discussed questions of health and healthy living as a way to help get ourselves to the point where we might benefit from medical extensions of the human lifespan. Now, there are several interesting topics that arose in our earlier conversation. One of those is that of genetically modified organisms. Now, a lot of people have this irrational fear of genetically modified organisms, and now that I've said that, I think you, the viewers, know what my position on this issue is, in that I do not see a reason per se to be afraid of GMOs, whether those be plants or animals. In fact, humans have been modifying organisms for a long time. It's just they've been modifying them through cruder techniques like selective breeding or even pure chance. And genetic modification today is simply a lot more precise. But I would invite all of your comments on this issue. Bill, what do you think about GMOs?
Well, my mini Labradoodle is a GMO. I mean, all dogs are GMOs. So it's dependent on what you're calling genetics. Okay, so there's genetically modifying an organism can be simply just breeding two different type of organisms together. That's how a lot of GMOs were made like 100 years ago. Lately, it's become more of a recombinant DNA, gene therapy type of thing to create GMOs. But really, it's quite the same thing, essentially, because it's just bringing different genes together. That's what modifying organisms genetically means. But the fact is that genetically modified organisms are a real benefit to farmers everywhere. Nobody buys normal corn, or corn seeds or anything. When a farmer wants to grow a crop of corn, they want the best corn. They want the one that gives the most ears of corn per stalk that they can get. They want the biggest corn, the tastiest corn. And to get that is genetically modified organisms. There practically isn't enough food in Whole Foods anymore that's not genetically modified in some way. Unfortunately, there was some abuse of the genetically modified organism system. There's been genetically modified organisms that were put on the market that weren't safe, tested for safety and things like that. And that's given genetically modified organisms a bad name. But in reality, GMOs are good for you. There's just a few that have been bad, and you're going to find that in every field there exists. But when people start realizing that even something like canola oil, which is really a popular oil, is a genetically modified organism, or it's from a genetically modified organism. People are going to start realizing everything is already genetically modified.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's an important message to communicate, because when people pursue healthy living, we don't want people to have irrational fears associated with that. And we don't want them to be afraid of substances or behaviors that they don't have to be afraid of just because somebody out there has given them negative publicity. We do want people to engage in critical reasoning and try to determine actually what is safe, what is not safe. And there are plenty of substances that are not safe and should be avoided. But just because something is genetically modified doesn't mean it falls into that category. In fact, support of genetically modified organisms, at least in general, under the principle that they might benefit the human condition, goes hand in hand with transhumanism, with the idea that science and technology can improve the human condition. There's no guarantee that just because something is found as is in nature, that it's somehow optimally configured for human consumption. Some people might make the evolutionary argument for that, humans evolved over hundreds of thousands of years alongside these naturally occurring substances, but in fact, there's no guarantee that an evolved outcome is beneficial for the individual organism.
Yeah, I can't stand when people say, it's natural. So is cocaine, and so is poison. Those are not natural,
right.
So don't say, when people do that, it's don't say that. I don't have that much knowledge on GMOs per se. I'm all for drought-resistant crops, higher yields. The only thing I don't like is the idea of terminator seeds and the way Monsanto goes about conducting their business. The only thing I've ever heard is that may not be true, but the higher yields tend to actually deplete the soil faster than like normal organic farming. That's the only like counter I've heard. And also, yeah, some of them have had bad raps. But other than that, no, I have no problem with them. Just Monsanto's not going to have to be so greedy.
And this really is a question of corporate practice.
I was going to say, yeah, the point about it is like Monsanto does so much want to feed the world, wants to control the world's food supply. So I think it's really bad. I mean, we have enough food to feed the world. Period. We have enough.
Right.
The only reason we don't is because we don't have enough infrastructure to get it to people who need it in time before it goes bad, or people can't afford it. And that's a shame. So like we're gonna let people starve because they won't give us enough money, and this food will probably just go bad and we'll throw it away. And I think that's cruel.
And that really is a socio-political challenge, in part a challenge of the technological infrastructure, but I think that is more readily overcome if there's a will to overcome it. But you're right, the food supply right now is more than sufficient to support the current world population or the world population that is likely to occur essentially once equilibrium is reached around the middle of the 21st century.
Yeah, I hear human population's supposed to peak, or like it's supposed to plateau, right?
Right, at around...
It's drop.
Or there's drops, or what's it going to do?
It's going to go up and then drop.
Really?
But that's because the baby boomers are going to start dying.
Oh yeah.
Unless we can do something about that through life extension. And that really, I think, also reinforces the necessity to recognize that the overpopulation argument is spurious. We are not in the midst of an overpopulation crisis right now. Birth rates are already declining everywhere in the world. It's just in some countries they're still higher than in others.
Yeah, but we're just having we're old heavy. So it's becoming really hard on the taxpayers and money-wise supporting this, not just because of money, but people.
Silver tsunami. You're talking about the silver tsunami.
Is that what it is?
Old heavy?
Yeah,
Right.
heavy.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just yeah, that's one of the things is that we're not, or like Japan, for example, they're not reproducing at a high enough replacement rate. So that's the other thing about with transhumanism. Old people, as you said, it costs a lot of taxpayers for all these conditions later in life, all of the care it takes, it's a lot of money. The other thing too, not just the care, but robots. So it's like so old people, other than them being not old and being able to live longer, we have robots that help with elderly care too. If there's not enough left, we have robots. That's what they're looking at in Japan right now, is to help with
I believe the biggest future of robotics is caregiving for the elderly.
Really?
I talk about that all the time.
Yeah, because that's what Japan is doing. They're doing that right now, having robots like help elderly people out of bed and carrying them.
We're not going to have, especially in Japan. Japan's the worst country, but Korea is also bad, and India is bad, and the United States is bad. In terms of, by 2050, something like 40% of the population is going to be over 65 because of the baby boom that occurred all over the world, not just in the United States. But the problem is that there haven't been enough young people being produced, and if produced is the right word, but it's as a result, for every person that's going to be in need of caregiving, that's going to be the number of people that are in the workforce. And there's not going to be any available people to do the caregiving.
Yeah.
And so robotics is what I see as the solution to the caregiving problem that's going to occur big time in 2050.
Anti-aging science will help a lot with that too. So
Yeah,
people
well,
won't be sick as long.
Right. If those elderly people now have the energy, the vitality, the youthfulness to once again work productively, that will help greatly as well. Because really, the reason why they're suffering, the reason why they're in need of care is because they're biologically old, not because they're chronologically old. So one of the main goals of transhumanism is to turn people who are chronologically old into people who are biologically young. And really, that dispels this popular Tithonus error, the idea that, the only way to materially increase lifespan is to become increasingly frailer and have an ever lower quality of life. The opposite is the case. You can't materially extend lifespan beyond the current ceiling of approximately 125 years, though the oldest recorded lifespan is 122 years, without rejuvenating the organism, without turning people into biologically younger individuals.
Increased lifespan has to be a side effect of increased health span. That's what it's going to be. It's like we can't make old people living longer who are in beds with tubes sticking in and out. They've got to be healthy.
So, John, what would you say have been the technologies that have helped you with your quality of life the most over the past few years?
Well, obviously my awesome chair. Not just mobility with my chair, like replacing walking, also my van. I have a van with modified hand controls that allow me to drive because my feet don't work. So it allows me to do accelerating and brake with one hand, with my other hand's on the steering wheel, something like that. So adaptive driving technology. And then on top of that, also I use voice recognition software. Dragon Speed has become hugely helpful for me. Or even my phone texting. I can do basic text messages, but if really long ones, it's just way too much. So definitely a voice.
Alexa.
Yeah, it's definitely voice recognition technology, adaptive driving equipment, as well as mobility technology and extensions of my arms, like grabbers and stuff, to pick stuff up, put it there. Yeah, definitely a lot of those things. Those are some.
Yes, and those technologies are part of transhumanism. 20 years ago, many of them would not have existed.
Yes, exactly.
That's important to recognize as well. Now, one of the practices that has been commonly talked about in the field of longevity advocacy, and certainly has been researched extensively, is caloric restriction. And there have been studies demonstrating significant life extension in yeast, in roundworms, in mice, in fruit flies, resulting from caloric restriction. But for more complex organisms like primates, and we humans are also primates, the results have been a lot more ambiguous. So, Bill, what are your thoughts about caloric restriction and the extent to which it may or may not benefit human longevity?
Well, caloric restriction is better than Burger King or McDonald's. So there are health benefits from leading a caloric restricted lifestyle. But the data hasn't shown in primates or humans that it actually extends lifespan as much as it does in the mice and the roundworms and the fruit flies and the yeast, as you were mentioning. I'm not opposed to caloric restriction. It's just that people aren't going to see the same benefits that these other animals have seen. But I'm just frankly just not convinced that this is the way to live longer. We have to find other ways for humans.
Yes, and even if there were some lifespan extending effect, it would be quite minor compared to what we're really seeking to achieve, because we're not seeking to extend the average life expectancy at birth from 78 to 85. We're seeking to extend it indefinitely, essentially, but 130 would be a good start.
I think 150 would be a good start.
I think the moment that we have somebody beating Jean Calment's record of 122 years, the world is going to pay significantly more attention to this pursuit.
Where did he come from?
Yes, she was a woman in Arles, France. She was born in 1875 and died in 1997.
A lot of people are taking metformin, so hopefully we start seeing some people get up to 130s.
Well, it'll be a while because the oldest person right now is like 116, I think.
117.
117? Okay, so it's,
You can do it!
so it's going to be at least 5 years before we see somebody exceed 122.
Yes,
You
and
should
from
contact them and tell them to start taking these.
We're trying
give
to
them
prove, we're
advice,
trying to prove
talk to
the
the
point.
doctors.
Take this drug.
From what I understand also, Jean Calment was a statistical outlier. The average life expectancy of supercentenarians, people in their 110s, has been very slowly creeping upward over the decades. But
115.
yes, so gradually we've seen the oldest supercentenarians typically go from being 115 to being 116 to being 117, and a lot of studies suggest that there is not a fixed upper cap on their lifespans. It's just over time a lot of debilitating conditions create a high probability of death with each year. So if your probability of death each year is 60%, statistically you're very unlikely to reach 122 as Jean Calment did. One of the big problems for people of that age is a condition called senile systemic amyloidosis, which is the buildup of amyloid plaques, not just in the brain, but in other organs of the body. And that's the significant reason why people who don't get cancer, who don't get diabetes, who don't get heart disease earlier in life succumb typically in their 110s. So if that can be overcome, that might lift at least the perceived ceiling of 125 years.
Did you see that new report that came out the other day? It said something around the lines of, if you make it past 80, your chances of dying become less.
That's interesting.
That's actually old data. When you get to that age, all the people that have the bad genetic markers, the high risk of cancer, high risk of heart disease, they've already died.
Yeah, because it kicks in earlier, right?
So now you kind of almost created like an inbreeding of people that have better genes.
Yeah.
And they end up living longer.
So, survivorship bias.
So it's like so if you had all those things, they would have come and had been fully fleshed out before them.
Yeah.
And since you had it, it's like, well, then here you go, keep going.
Yes, it's as we were discussing at our last gathering, Bill, once somebody reaches their mid-80s, their probability of getting cancer for the first time actually begins to decrease. So, one incentive to live longer.
I've also heard that people in the Asian countries, certain like off the island on Okinawa or something, like people who live there have some of the highest life expectancies in the world.
They used to.
They used to.
Not anymore. In fact,
Where's
I've been
it
to
now?
Okinawa a few times. Well, it's a statistical phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like
You've
if
been to
you start
Okinawa?
looking all over the world, you're going to find some populations living longer than others. But as soon as people started sequencing the entire genomes of some of these populations, they started finding out that it wasn't the diet, it wasn't what they're eating, it was more some kind of small amount of inbreeding that had resulted in them having less cancer genes or heart disease genes. What has happened is that they've found other populations that were on the exact same diet and they had the lowest longevity. And it was because they were enriched for heart disease genes and cancer genes.
I watched, you make a very good point there, because I was watching Through the Wormhole, Morgan Freeman. You watch that show?
Mm-hmm.
It was a show where you talk about like different scientific stuff, and he was talking about this, and I brought it up in one of my classes, because he was talking about exactly what you're talking about, how some people will exercise, they'll do this and that, eat healthy, and still they'll die young. Whereas they show this other group of people, like an old lady who doesn't exercise and eat healthy, a man who still smokes, and they're like in their like 90s or something. And it's like, why are these individuals haven't had anything happen to them?
Good genetics.
And that's what it came down. It's like their DNA just repairs itself so good that even their DNA repair is so good that it's better than exercising, all these other things combined.
Mm-hmm. And that
That's
speaks
crazy.
to an important point, and that is lifestyle is not enough. And people can be conscientious and do all of the right things, or what they consider to be the right things, and still succumb to disease and to death. And there is no cosmic justice out there right now.
No, karma's real.
Well, but transhumanism endeavors to bring about greater justice by allowing human genomes to be improved and allowing conditions that cause early mortality to be edited out of the genome, while essentially genes that contribute to greater longevity to be provided to more people. I look forward to the day when somatic gene editing becomes a widespread procedure.
Gene clinic.
Yeah, well, let's say genome sequencing becomes so cheap that people can do it just on their home computers. Right. Insert a cell sample and the computer will give them an output. This is your genome. Mm-hmm. These are the problem areas of your genome. Go to your local gene clinic. Get an injection of something that will essentially alter the genome in your somatic cells. It would have to go beyond just embryonic gene editing, because we want people who are already alive and already fully mature adults to benefit from it. And some people worry that, parents are going to select for certain genetic attributes of their children without the children being consulted. But I really think the future is in somatic gene editing for people who are fully developed adults who have the ability to consent, who have the ability to say, okay, this is what I want to extend my lifespan, I want to reduce my propensity for certain diseases.
So they say, go to the gene clinic. Levi Strauss? No, the other one.
Oh, that's
Designer genes.
Designer genes. Yes, indeed.
What's your thoughts on CBD?
Good and bad. A lot of crap in literature, though.
A lot of crap in literature?
Yeah,
What's the truth?
Well, there's no data at all saying that any cannabinoids at all have any beneficial effect on inflammation. And there's a lot of people saying it does, but when you go look at the studies, it turns out, well, somebody who had a headache suddenly didn't have a headache. Maybe it was because it reduced inflammation. But that's all it says. It doesn't say they didn't do any inflammatory. There's not a single study where anybody's looked at an inflammatory marker like C-reactive protein. And it bothers me that nobody has. I believe people have and found out it had no effect on C-reactive protein. And of course, they couldn't publish.
I was reading somewhere that it was CBD was a stronger antioxidant than for glutamate toxicity or glutamine toxicity in the brain. I forget which one. It was a better antioxidant than E.
It's not.
So yeah, he said some good, some bad on CBD.
From a medical point of view, I'm not aware of anything that actually has been scientifically peer-reviewed to show it's a good for you thing. It's been a marketing ploy. It's been working quite effectively to get people to start buying it.
Because it's hard to do peer-reviewed studies on something that's federally illegal.
No, it's not.
It's not?
Why
do they always say that? It's hard to do studies on something that's illegal, federally illegal.
It's part of the marketing.
It's probably do studies on cocaine and other drugs.
Yeah, animal studies and stuff like that. There's been lots of studies done with LSD on humans. Military done.
I heard that for a while. I was like buying it. I was like, oh, it makes sense. But now I'm thinking, wait, no, doesn't make any sense.
We've tested every kind of cannabinoid you can find in any kind of like plant related to marijuana.
Yeah.
And
where at?
At my company. We buy them. Yeah, seriously, we buy them from chemical companies that manufacture these things for research purposes.
Yeah.
So we tested all of them and had no problems. We didn't have to sign anything special or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
And we did that 15 years ago.
15 years ago? What prompted you to do it?
Because we were testing everything on the planet.
Testing everything on the planet.
Yeah. Our high throughput drug screen, we were checking 4,000 different chemicals a day. Mm-hmm. So we were finding, the bottleneck was finding the chemicals. So we were getting every source imaginable, but people kept saying, try this, try that, and one of the things they came up with is things in the marijuana plant. But we did, lots of natural products, lots of synthetic chemicals. We screened more than 1 million different chemicals.
How long has your company been in business?
20 years.
Did you found it? Impressive. What do they mainly do? Do they test compounds there, or?
No, it's just one. We're looking for a cure for aging.
Oh, that's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
All right, and that's why you're testing so many compounds. You're looking for ones that are likely candidates.
Well, that's one of the things we're doing. So, one of the ways we're doing that is look for ways of producing telomerase in human cells to lengthen telomeres. And so
you're looking for chemicals to induce it.
That's one of the things. Yeah, looking for chemicals that induce the gene. But we're also looking for ways of doing gene therapy to deliver telomerase. Mm-hmm. Plus, we're looking for alternatives to even telomerase as ways of lengthening telomerase as alternatives to telomerase.
So, were you the one who discovered telomerase? Mm-hmm. But yet, some woman got the Nobel Prize.
She discovered the activity in a pond scum organism.
So it's like there's something going on here, right?
Yeah. But then she never made any connections to aging or cancer or anything like that. And then 10 years later...
What made you look at it?
I was looking for a clock, some kind of clock that ticks inside of us. Yeah. And when I heard about telomeres, it made the most sense. It was the best clock I could ever imagine. And so I joined forces with a guy named Cal Harley, who was thinking the same way I did, and that got started, and the Geron Corporation got started.
Geron, that's huge, right?
So, there's not a single scientific peer-reviewed study that says there's anything wrong with aspartame. That's one of the hearsay things.
You think so?
Every company that sells any kind of drinking product is trying to compete with Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi because they're the number one selling drinks on the planet. Yeah. And so they badmouth aspartame. But you can't find any data whatsoever showing that aspartame is bad for you. You can find websites that talk about all the bad things, but you can't find any data that supports any of those claims.
I don't know about that, man.
Check it out.
I've looked into a lot of that, and one of the things that it got approved, aspartame got approved against a lot of scientists saying, no, we shouldn't approve it yet. But then the guy went ahead and approved it against their decision. And then that guy...
Why? Because these scientists had no data These are all being bribed.
No, these scientists were against it because there was no good scientific data showing that it was good. But the guy who pushed it forward actually worked for the company that were going to push this product.
Yeah, but scientists did say there's nothing good about aspartame, but that's not the point. The point is that.
No, they just wasn't.
But we don't want it. We don't want Diet Pepsi in the show because it's too controversial.
I'm fine with Diet Pepsi being there. I don't believe that there are any scientifically verified harms of aspartame or any other artificial sweetener.
Yeah, but
I disagree.
I get such flack when I go to conferences and I'm drinking Diet Coke. People are like, what? I can't believe it. And then I have discussions with them, and next thing you know, they're getting their own Diet Pepsi. It's just my high school reunion, my 45th high school reunion was like a month ago. Everybody was shocked that I was drinking Diet because they knew I was so healthy. They went out and bought cases of it. After
the one thing Diet Pepsi was meant to do, which is help people lose weight, long-term studies shown that it hasn't.
Yeah, I know. That's true, but why?
But why is because the reason why is because you think you're getting calories in your brain is
that's what they make. That's what they tell you. But the reason is because it's people
satisfied.
thinking, "Wow, I'm drinking Diet Coke, therefore I can eat everything else. I can go get Burger King, stuff like that."
Yeah, there's that
because I'm drinking Diet Coke. No,
I'll get a side of Diet Coke.
I'll get a Big Mac and then fries and a side of Diet Coke.
Yeah,
but using it just to lose weight, people overcompensate.
Yes,
but there's actually a lot of people that did use Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi to lose weight, and it worked.
right.
Okay?
I haven't seen
It's a question of what else they do, but it's not the beverage itself that's at fault. It's the psychological response that some people
comes from it. So they
have to it.
Yeah, that's the thing. They said the people that use Diet Pepsi, it's not the Pepsi's fault, but it's the fact that they're using it to lose weight, but they overcompensate with other things. So that's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, but that's not their fault.
Yeah, that's not this fault. It's the fact that they're using that gives them the idea that they can do these other things. But very interesting, Bill. Very interesting. It's always interesting to hear counterpoints to stuff you hear. Because a lot of people is just like, oh yeah, I've heard that, but it's really nice to have someone say, no, I have nothing. It's just really nice to hear someone who actually disagrees with you. And it's good that we're able to have these conversations in a civilized manner. And even at the end of the day, we'll just disagree. Stuff like that. It's good you don't get a lot of that with my friends.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's one of the purposes of the Enlightenment Salon, these kinds of conversations.
Now, one other interesting area that we were discussing was the role of artificial intelligence in politics. And in particular, yes.
It's interesting. Okay, democracy is defined by Aristotle, only works under two assumptions. One, everyone is educated. Two, everyone participates. If not, it just doesn't work. And I think this last election shows that our democracy is kind of failing, in my opinion. And the problem is we have a population of people who aren't that educated, and it's hard because everyone thinks they deserve a right. But at the same time, someone who's gone to college, been educated, studies all this stuff, this is my take. His voice gets canceled out by some dude who's never gone to something, doesn't know politics, votes against his own interests. So it doesn't work that way anymore, and I don't think it's going to get any better. So my take on it is either a certain part of the population votes or the AI will do it. Because the thing about AI, which I've seen, is they may be able to think of things we can't think of. They may be able to see possibilities that we don't. And they could make possibly better decisions than us. That's just me. I've become a little cynical ever since our last election, and when I see some of the people out, I'm just like, God. But, so that's why I say I think AI probably has some role. I mean, it can already diagnose diseases pretty well, on par, if not better, than doctors. Who says it can't choose a better economic plan?
I would say there are definite applications of artificial intelligence in politics. I don't think AI has advanced far enough to make decisions yet about outcomes, but the U.S. Transhumanist Party, for instance, supports the use of AI algorithms to determine the boundaries of political districts, because that is a more objective and likely neutral outcome than the current way of determining political districts, which is through lobbying by the two major political parties to carve out so-called safe districts for themselves, which have very unusual shapes.
Yeah, like all around. Yeah, I've seen that. Gerrymandering is the word my stepdad always used to bring up. It makes it so an area that would be more democratic, like even Texas would actually be democratic, but because this district is so weird, it comes out Republican.
Yes.
So actually, it's very interesting how I think America would be probably mostly Democratic if it weren't for redistricting in the prison industrial complex.
I would say if all of the obstacles to a truly representative politics were removed, America would be neither Republican nor Democratic. There would probably be tens of political parties, and in each election it would be a toss-up as to which party essentially gets significant influence. There would probably be no majority in Congress. There would have to be coalitions like in parliamentary democracy.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides, I think, of democracy is too much indecisiveness amongst the population. Like, I'll give you an example. India was comparing itself to China in this one article. An Indian guy was saying, yeah, the democracy is like great and all, but a lot of times it's just so indecisive on things, we can never get anything done. And then whereas China, they're like, build a road right away. So that's just my take is like, do you think at one point we will get out of a two-party system and join, say, like a one-party system? Is that even possible?
I don't think a one-party system is the desirable way to go. I would go in the other direction of
more parties,
hyper-pluralistic society, but with limits on the scope of impact that democracy can have. So, for instance, there shouldn't be a vote on what you may or may not have for dinner. That should be entirely your individual choice. And likewise, a lot of matters should not be put up for a vote. It should just be a matter of what do people have the right to do on their own initiative. Yes, private property, private institutions making an impact, or have some sort of set of rules that is defined in advance, that is objective, and people know how to operate within the parameters of that system. So for instance, if you do have public roads, you have rules of the road that people follow, and you don't need to vote on whether you can turn left on a particular street that's already predefined.
We decided to vote on no more stop signs. Yeah, so that's one thing I always wondered. I've always found quite off-putting about politics is the two-party system. Third parties, no. Okay, there's like every now and then one gets a seat in like Congress somewhere, and Jesse Ventura was one time the independent governor of
Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Bring down SmackDown. Anyways, libertarian. Yeah, it's so it's really hard for. It's either like you said, choice A or B, but we want neither. You know?
Right.
What you just said was, I think we have a major problem with the way our ballots are done. Like I said in the previous meeting. I think a lot of times choosing A or B, what about having the option of saying, I don't care either way, and I'm just not going to put an X in between.
Exactly.
So let's have some type of scale, because a lot of times we are forced to vote when we don't care at all about the issue. Mm-hmm. And therefore, and some people do care about the issue, and so we should let their vote count more than my vote when I don't really care. It's like put an X in, like somewhere between the two spots instead of an X in the boxes. And somewhere in between to show how much you care one way or the other.
That's good. It's almost like saying, I don't know. And as a result,
then you go right in the middle. But sometimes you say, well, I'm leaning towards this stuff, but I don't want to give it a full vote.
But then do they count that as like a quarter vote, or do they count that as all? What do they
put it on a scale. Put it on a scale so
then we add numbers up.
Wherever it is, like you could have 100 points or 10 points or something like that, just somewhere along there, and that's that determines what your vote is. Now people would say, well, that's going to be fixed anyway, because if people don't care, they're going to be voting randomly. But that's not the case. A lot of times people, like let's say if somebody's running for Congress, okay, person whose last name starts with an A is more likely to get a vote than somebody whose last name starts with a Z. So there's
psychology.
There's just all kinds of variables, and plus a lot of different things when things are put on ballots is what they call them. Sometimes the name of
how they phrase
more attractive. Yeah, and it's like fortunately there's too much marketing involved in politics, so people should be able to give the option of saying, well, I don't really care. I don't feel strongly one way or another, but maybe I'm a little leaning towards this idea. But as soon as they put it,
there's a show called Futurama. There's these race of people called the neutrals, and they're like, how do you feel? I have no strong feeling one way or the other. That's a good point. Yeah, we're offered A or B, but we want neither. But we don't get that choice. So that's why I've had the problem. Is it seems like we're always like a house divided can't stand. And what's it going to take for humanity to just become like a one world nation? Do we have to find aliens or what? It's just, I mean, sovereignty is cool and all, but after a while, like too much nationalism could turn bad really fast, thinking we're so much better. I have this, I hate this idea that some people think American lives are worth more than other people's lives, third world children's lives, for refugees' lives. It makes me sick, dude. We're all human beings. We're all one big family. We're on this planet. We're all gonna live, or we're all gonna die. So we have to work together as one and not just get so caught up with borders and race and religion. I used to be really mad against religion because I was a hardcore atheist when I was younger. But now I've become much more peaceful, much more tolerant. I don't want to take away your belief, and guess what? I can't do it. Like you have to do that. And so no longer do I go on these vendettas. I just try and, instead of do something bad, I try to be more constructive and just tell people about science and try and help them out, and we can have a talk. But I'm no longer trying those little things I was used to doing. What was I saying?
Yes, I do.
Two parties, the
right.
party. So like, what do you think? So we'll have like more parties, but then how, instead of one party, we'll think you'll have more than two.
Yes, so there are many ways to improve the voting system, by the way, to create more representative outcomes than the current first-past-the-post system. One possibility would be proportional representation, where people who don't get the majority of the votes still get, say, seats in a legislature or another type of influence proportional to how many votes they've actually received. Another possibility, which the U.S. Transhumanist Party employs in its internal ballots, is ranked preference voting, where people don't just vote for one choice, they rank order all of the choices, and then there could be multiple rounds of instant runoffs if necessary, where the person or option that gets the lowest number of number one votes is eliminated in the first round, and then in the second round, people who voted for that person as their number one choice get their number two choices moved up to number one, and then the tabulation keeps going until there are two choices and one of them will necessarily have a majority, or there are more than two choices left but one of them still has the greatest number of number one votes. And there are other voting systems that have been proposed. Almost all of them provide a fairer outcome than the first past the post system that we have today. The problem is that system right now is entrenched because both the Republican and Democratic parties want it to be that way, and in order to break through that logjam, essentially both of those parties need to be thoroughly discredited in the minds of the general public. They're already doing a lot of that work.
Yeah, right now, both the right and the left
Yes.
are both just making people like, what are you doing?
Yes, they are no longer anything that could be referred to as moderate or centrist. We are the sensible, moderate, even centrist alternative. We are the party that focuses on policy. We're not the party that focuses on essentially just beating down the other side, so to speak, or tribalism or identity politics. We are not the party that simply wants... Yes. Exactly. We're not the party that simply wants to win the next election and be as shocking and outrageous and show that the other party is the greatest evil possible who will bring about the end of the world.
I don't see AI really pertaining in like votes directly or creating legislation anytime soon. Well, I mean, it depends anytime soon. 15 years from now, you'll probably start seeing human level general intelligence and robots, and that is something that should be discussed and was discussed in Congress in 2017. You do see government starting to talk about AI more now. The UK Parliament even had a conference about it. Well, the main issue I think with AI, automation, and robotics right now is with job loss. I think I read by 2015, already 4 million jobs have been lost because of that. And self-driving cars are about to wipe out one of the number one jobs, which is driving, right? Self-driving trucks and delivery jobs. And taxis, those are about to just be wiped out. And one of the main ways to integrate this properly is what you've heard of as universal basic income. Yes. That's one of the most talked about ways, which is actually a lot more helpful than I thought it would be. The studies have shown that there's a lot of social growth that occurs in communities that have been tested with UBIs. And so that's actually a lot more promising than I thought it would be.
Yes, and that makes sense because with a universal basic income, people don't have to worry about subsistence and they can be creative even when it comes to ways of making a living. So somebody can start a small business and maybe it will succeed, maybe it will fail, but at least they've gotten a chance to implement an idea that probably would never have been put into practice if they absolutely had to make a living right now.
Yeah.
Some people could be artists, some people could be writers, some people could engage in work that is useful and productive but maybe not monetarily remunerative, say going around cleaning litter in public spaces.
One of the main arguments for UBI is for when science technology starts dominating society, and so that we can provide wealth to individuals who start losing their jobs, and that's what's occurring right now. I think it'd be a lot better to just do that sooner than later, so that we can learn more. And I think one of the main arguments is that people will just use the money for drugs and whatnot, but the results of studies have shown that that's not the case.
A big part of AI in politics, though, is what is the definition of AI? Okay, and one of the things that when I studied artificial intelligence back in the 1970s, the whole subject area was how to make computers like humans.
Yeah.
Okay, was how to make, like for instance, a question that would be asked is when you ask somebody, what day is today? And they say, well, today's Sunday. Okay, then the question is, how did you know that? How did you figure that out? Okay, so the goal was to teach a computer to answer that question the same way a human would. Whereas now that's not the case anymore. Now AI is all about making computers better than humans, do it in a better way than humans. And so when it gets to politics, if we were still doing AI as a way of making computers to be like humans, then I would say computers should be given the right to vote just like humans do. But if we are creating a world where computers are going to be better than humans, the question becomes, should we just let the computers vote for us?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I'm saying that if we did that, there won't be a vote because computers are all going to agree on the same thing because there's really, most of the time, there's only one best answer.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that I know the answer, but I'm saying that's the discussion.
They're not going to just be like, a bunch of Albert Einsteins either. They're going to be super intelligent, and they're going to become even more intelligent, and that should be occurring fairly soon too.
That's a good point. I was going to say is that that's what I'm talking about.
We could do away with reality.
That's what I'm talking about. But ever since this last election, it's kind of shown that maybe at some point that will be the option because they will be smarter. They can make really, really good choices.
It'd be like monkeys trying to tell us how to run politics. It's like we've never
get out of here, you monkey.
The caution, though, that I would have is humans currently still do design AI algorithms, and they will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. As long as the AI algorithms remain narrow and under the control of human designers, it's possible to introduce what's called algorithmic bias, in the sense that the algorithms... once you run the algorithm, it operates the way it's programmed to operate, but the way it's programmed, the initial assumptions, the data inputs might be skewed toward a certain outcome that was the result of bad human decisions in the past.
How do you remove human influence from designing AI?
The one thing about AI I always say is how do we incorporate the human touch in there so that once it gets super smart, it doesn't just wipe us out?
Well, I think, generally speaking...
Wait, that's the best question.
Maybe that's the best solution.
Best solution.
Well, I don't want humankind to be wiped out, but my hope is...
saying that you see it in all the movies where it's like, all right, turn it on, and then they turn it on and they wipe us out.
But the question has to become, what is best for humanity? Okay?
Yeah.
And wiping the human race isn't the best thing for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as robots...
do the best thing that's for humanity.
We're asking robots to decide what's best for humanity. Not what they think is best, but what really is the best. And
that's also... Or also... But I always worry, it's like, all right, we gotta cut half the population. Oh man, I don't think of that. It's always those, you always gotta think of like the worst case scenario, because this is really powerful technology that we're dealing with. And that's what was said about voting people, about robots eventually voting. And the reason I say this now is because honestly, people, just aren't gonna be able to keep up with the rapid changes in technology that are gonna occur over the next 20 to 30 years. And they're just going to be at a total loss. And also, honestly, people don't know. Some people are just really dumb and don't know what's good for them. So, I honestly think a robot would be better.
Well, my view is greater intelligence at least tends to correlate with greater morality. Not always, but in many cases. So I think it would help to have truly intelligent systems involved in the political process. That being said, my hope is for humankind to also become more intelligent and for there not to be such a clear bright line between human and artificial forms of intelligence, but rather having them be integrated, whether it's Ray Kurzweil's idea of merging with machines, or more prosaically, it's a question of not just having these tools at our disposal, but having these tools give us part of the picture that enables us to then take into account other information and make the decision. That is essentially how we could be integrated with AI, even if we're not configured in terms of our brains becoming positronic, for instance, but rather we would have the tools, essentially, and the insights to use our judgment more intelligently. That's one possibility that is more immediate, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We just need to be, that's what I said, we need to be smart and we all need to participate for it to work. Mm-hmm. And if you have people who are just going to be dumb and choose to be dumb and don't take bother to research and stuff like that, I still think those people should be allowed to vote. I'm sorry, because they're not an informed voice. So why should they don't even understand climate, so why should they get a vote on climate change? They don't understand it.
Well, I think the solution to that is...
But you get what I'm saying?
The solution to that is limit the scope of voting to situations where essentially there's no viable alternative to majority rule or rule by whatever outcome the voting system favors.
Or maybe that's not even in the ballot. That's already just they're going to do it and they don't need the population's decision. I don't know. I just see us always being kind of held back by half of our country who doesn't want to basically get on board with what established scientists has already said. There's so many billion years old, evolution is true, the Earth is not flat. Basic things we take for granted, half of the U.S. is still believing, and we have to carry along their voices, their opinions. Some might be good, but some are just way out of date, and it's just going to slow us down, and that's why I go with the AI voting.
Well, science should never be politicized to begin with.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is important to recognize. Nobody should vote on what scientific theory is likely to be true or well supported or not well supported.
I'm just saying that's just how out of touch they are, and that they're going to make informed choices about our country based on the knowledge that the Earth is 1,000 years old, it's flat, and evolution's not true. So you see, if they don't know those basic things, how can they? I just say, if you don't know those things, you're not going to be the most educated, not going to be able to make the most informed choices.
Well, I'd have the caveat that people's level of knowledge or ignorance may vary across areas. So somebody may be a really good plumber or a really good carpenter, but have no understanding of evolution.
Yeah,
that
but
person,
you shouldn't be able to then vote on it if you don't know anything about it.
And that person, I agree, should not be able to vote on anything.
And then if he asked me if I could vote on plumbing, I'd say, no, I can't vote on plumbing. I don't know anything about that.
So I think the problem is we have voting right now being put forth in terms of these package deals. Like you vote for one party or the other party, and there are two packages which really each contain a lot of unsavory and counterproductive, anti-progressive elements, whether you pick the Republican package or the Democratic package. They also contain a lot of elements that are not logically related to one another. So if people could pick and choose in terms of particular issues, particular stances, that would be a superior type of system. Also, if the scope of politics were narrowed, I think that would help, because nobody should be voting on what's the best way to install a pipe in a building. There are some objective scientific and engineering considerations for that. Likewise, nobody should vote on whether evolution is true or what the extent of climate change is. Again, scientific inquiry and investigation are the ways to discover that, and majority opinion has often been wrong in matters of science before. There were times when majority opinion held that the Earth was flat or that the Earth was the center of the universe, and people who disagreed were considered heretics, and they were forced to recant or or even executed.
Yeah, that is true, but it's kind of a little bit different with climate change, because it's not so much like ideology as we have all these different branches of science converging on one single thing, and that is that the climate is definitely changing. And to ignore that is just to basically forget it. I know majority doesn't always rule. I know that for a fact, and but when you have all these people, all these eminent scientists, not just people, scientists, all converging on one same fact, it gets pretty incontrovertible. That's the one thing I was going back to, the majority of all these rules when it comes to voting. Well, what if like 30% of the population is like the really smart ones, 70% of them are dumb ones, just because they outnumber us, just because people, those ones outnumber us, does that make it right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Some of those things I come to that I'm always thinking about, and I'm just like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
So it's important that essentially, in as many cases as possible, a majority does not get to force its will upon a minority, because you could often have situations where the minority is actually more correct, at least in some respects.
Exactly.
So the best solution is to let free inquiry and discussion continue.
Exactly.
And generally speaking, if you do have truly free inquiry and discussion and people are interested in the pursuit of
They'll
truth,
go to the right one.
yes, and they'll go to that without coercive force binding them.
That's what I was watching things like let the other side, these protesters, let them speak, because he said that if the fools will expose themselves because they are fools. If they just let them talk, you'll see how unprofessional they are. So it's like one of those things where instead of shouting and like not listening, let's have a conversation, and then people can listen and make a decision.
Yes, and well, one of the objectives of these Enlightenment salons is to facilitate this kind of conversation. So I hope that our viewers enjoyed the multifaceted discussion that we had today and have taken away from it aspects that could help in their own lives, be it in the pursuit of health and longevity, or in the understanding of science, or in thinking about how to improve political systems. With that, thank you very much to all of our guests, and I hope that everyone watching has a good remainder of their day. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 5th Enlightenment Salon. And this is a favorable coincidence. We have 5 participants in our 5th Enlightenment Salon. Yes. And in order, John Murrieta, Bobby Ridge, James Cohagen, Bill Andrews, and Gennady Stolyarev II. Welcome to everybody.
Who's the lady who had her telomeres extended?
Liz Parrish.
Liz Parrish. I especially liked her presentation of that.
Bobby and John, you had an opportunity to interview her recently. I know that you'll be publishing the video of the interview on your channel, but what can our viewers look forward to in that interview?
Yeah, I thought it was a great interview. She's so awesome to talk to. And she discussed some of those promising treatments that she has right now, that her company's doing. And she got very passionate about extending lifespan, but also not only reversing aging, but helping children, curing their diseases. And yeah, there's some great information in there.
It was really nice to be able to talk with her about the kind of research that her company does and the things they do. But we got off topic on a thing I just wanted to mention. I think I might have mentioned it before, but I can go to it in fuller detail. Is we were talking about epidural stimulators, and looks to be the next big thing for spinal cord injury. I was at my physical therapy the other day, and the guy who I worked with just finished doing a workshop in the University of Louisville in Kentucky, and he actually got a training on this new technology and what it's going to be like, and they say it's pretty much the next big thing for spinal cord injury. They started this research in 2011, and it's essentially a little pacemaker, almost like a TENS unit. It goes on the spine where the injury site is, where the scar tissue is, and it sends a little bit of millivolt, and that allows the signal to transduce and have the person move his foot. They were only going to do it for pain killing, because a lot of times you get chronic pain and neuropathy, but they found people are actually able to restore voluntary movement. It's very simple right now. We got moving a leg, engaging trunk muscles, standing. We aren't walking yet, but through more research and through more funding, we're going to definitely have a means to get people walking again, and that's very promising because it's very tangible, it's very real. And
I guess Liz Parrish is working with people who have spinal cord injuries.
Yeah, I guess so.
We sent her a few links.
Yeah, the really cool thing about this device is it's already been FDA approved for pain, But again, it goes in your body, so it's a little risky to surgery, anything, but it's pretty low risk. But what the greatest thing they're finding out now is that they don't even have to put it on the dura, they can put it on your back and send the signals through that way. And that will actually start to do it. And they do you with training. And the most craziest thing, I have to read it again, but I read it 4 times because it just was so crazy, is that with 4 months of training with the shock on your back, your brain creates new neural networks, and now you no longer even need the shocker anymore. Now you can walk or move your legs right now. But what's really cool is that it's kind of like a pacemaker for people who have heart problems, or like a insulin pump for people who have diabetes. But it's an electrode, it's a stimulator for your spine. And it's restoring people's ability to walk, and not just walk, they're having better control of their blood pressure, better control of their temperature, bowel, bladder, sexual function, all this great stuff is coming back. It's really something I've been very passionate about, or this thing that Liz said, I'm gonna ask her if I can patent it, is that it's only fair that we get you out of that chair.
Yeah, so that'd be great.
I've been working with Liz Parrish for, I'd say 6-7 years now. I think she's one of the most resourceful people I've ever met. She's really making things happen. I think the future is going to be a lot better place because of the effort she's doing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what she and BioViva pull off.
Yes, actually, at the last RadFest, I was privy to a conversation between Liz and Zoltan Istvan, the founder and former chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And at the time, he was just there as a speaker providing some historical context for his presidential campaign, but there was a reception afterward, and Liz and Zoltan were speaking, and they're both extremely genuine people about their view that aging, disease, involuntary death need to be defeated within our lifetimes. And they were also expressing frustration as to why hasn't the general culture caught on to this yet. They pointed out that from their individual backgrounds, they're not, let's say, the most distinguished of experts. Liz Parrish is a mother who became concerned about the way the medical system treats children with chronic conditions, and so she got into the activism and she got into the science. She attended a lot of SENS conferences, and she became one of the leading voices for life extension advocacy in the world. And Zoltan started as a journalist. He read a lot of philosophy books. He traveled throughout the world. He was in a lot of conflict zones, and he nearly stepped on a landmine in Vietnam. And when he had that near-death experience, he essentially realized that he could have almost lost everything, and that really impelled him to realign his priorities and devote much of his life from that point to date to promoting transhumanism and life extension and trying to change cultural perceptions. So the way they spoke to one another, and I just happened to be an onlooker, really drove home the point that these are two people who consider themselves, at least, to be of fairly ordinary backgrounds, but through the realization of the importance of these endeavors, they became leading advocates. And I think that's a lesson to everyone watching this, that you too can become a leading advocate for this movement. Just educate yourself, be aware of the latest developments, and communicate to people in a way that they can relate to, that these are the most important causes of our era. So along the lines of longevity, earlier in this discussion, before we turned on the camera, we were talking about long-lived organisms, and there are various long-lived plants and animals, and they have some similarities but also some dissimilarities to humans. Bill, you had mentioned that, for instance, jellyfish and long-lived trees have some significant dissimilarities to humans and other mammals.
Yeah, well, jellyfish are actually really not one organism. They're actually a mixture of organisms. You can break off a piece of a jellyfish and that will form a new jellyfish. Humans aren't like that. Okay, so anybody trying to figure out a way to extend lifespan in humans by mimicking the jellyfish is not going to get anywhere, because we are not jellyfish. But the same is true for like trees, like the bristlecone pines and things like that. They talk about how these trees are like 2,000 years old, but when you go look at the tree, you see one branch way up high that's alive. The rest of the tree is dead as a doornail. I don't think we want to be considering ourselves alive if one of our fingers is alive and the rest of it's is dead. So those kind of things that are allowing those jellyfish and trees to live longer are not something that's going to really benefit humans, as far as I can tell. Something could surprise me. But I do think that species closer to humans are going to be providing some information. And getting a little bit closer, we now know that lobsters and clams, humpback whales, tortoises, some birds and some fish, they all have no detectable aging process. People never started asking how long animals live until the time of Darwin, about 150 years ago, if I'm keeping my math right. And now they're finding that, the only way to tell how old an organism is to find it when it's first born, put it into a cage or an aquarium, and watch it. Well, some of these animals, 150 years later, are still showing no signs of aging. The thing that I like about that is that they've been shown, all these animals have been shown to have telomerase produced in all their cells. Their telomeres don't get shorter. They have no detectable aging, and they rarely get cancer and other diseases. And so it's suggesting that lengthening telomeres, the thing I'm trying to do with humans, is got a lot of optimism for believing that it's going to really be good for humans. Now, I did say that you can't tell how old an animal is unless you are there when it's born, because they don't have rings on a tree like trees do. But clams actually do have something like that. Every year, a clam gets a new stripe on its shell. And now people have found clams that are over 500 years old. And it's all because their telomeres don't get shorter because of telomerase is produced. And so, yeah, we aren't all alike. In fact, getting even closer to humans, when we start looking at mice and stuff, we find out that mice really aren't very, very similar to humans at all in terms of aging. One of the most remarkable studies that I've ever seen, has been reproduced several times 20, 25 years ago, is that when you take mouse cells and human cells and grow them in a petri dish, they both reach what's called the Hayflick limit, or called senescence. But in the mouse cells, you can overcome that senescence with antioxidants. When you try treating with telomerase, the length of telomeres, it has no effect. The cells still go into senescence at the Hayflick limit. Humans are the other way around. When you treat with antioxidants, it has no effect. They still level off and go into senescence. But if you treat with telomerase, the length of telomeres, it obliterates the Hayflick limit. The cells just never enter senescence. This is a major difference between mice and humans, which makes me wonder how much mouse data is really good for humans. And so if we start doing animal studies more than what we did when I was at Geron Corporation, we would probably start using a primate. Most primates have been shown to age like humans. In fact, I should mention that of all the animals that have been tested at University of Texas Southwestern, the only animals that have been shown to age like humans are dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, and deer, and also other non-human primates and engineered mice. Engineered mice like what Ron DePinto used in his mouse studies. All the other animals, they don't age like humans. They have some other aging process going on. So I'm looking, because of the fact that our research with the gene therapy is so expensive, I spent a lot of time looking for what's the smallest primate in the world. And I found out that small primate is called Madame Bertha's mouse lemur. And it's only found in Madagascar. So I've already been in contact with officials and other scientists in Madagascar to start doing studies on this. But this primate, full grown, is the size of a human thumb. In fact, there's a very famous picture of Shaquille O'Neal sitting there with one of these primates in his hand, and the primate's just barely the size of his thumb. That would allow us to do studies on aging in an animal model, an animal that ages like humans do, that wouldn't cost the absorbent amounts of money that gene therapy does.
I would be concerned because, at least for mice, as soon as the studies are stuff they're affiliated with, unless there's a continuum, they're put down afterwards. I would be concerned about what would be the fate of these primates after.
So am I. Okay, and I'm glad you said that, because one of the reasons we don't do animal studies at Sierra Science is I just cannot stand the fact that animals are just put down afterwards. When I was doing research, psychological research at University of California, San Diego, and we were given rabbits and pigeons and things like that to study, we were told that at the end of the experiments, all the animals had to be exterminated. Well, you can believe me, I did a midnight raid and rescued my animals and took them home with me. But and that's the first time I ever confessed to that, so I hope UC San Diego doesn't throw me in jail for doing that. But apparently it was the law.
Yes.
But in all the conversations I've been having with people in Madagascar and stuff, I've been saying I would like to use lemurs or primates that are pets in people's homes. Okay, and I would like to go to that home, treat the pet, and let them watch it. Let the pet run around, just keep track of it, things like that. I do not want to see any harm. I don't believe in harm. Nobody should ever get harmed in trying to develop a treatment, because if that's not an issue to you and you're only interested in the money, I'm hoping that we can set up a study like that where the animals benefit tremendously from the treatment.
I agree with you completely, Bill. I think the law requiring experimental animals to be destroyed after the conclusion of the experiment needs to be repealed. And indeed, the Transhumanist Party, in its platform, is opposed to the euthanasia of healthy, non-contagious, non-dangerous animals, especially if a trial is investigating lifespan and effects of particular treatments on aging. One would think one would want to keep these animals alive for as long as possible, because setting some artificial cutoff for the trial would defeat the purpose. If you're actually successful in extending lifespan, but your trial is only up to X months, you don't know how successful you've been unless you let those animals survive as long as they would have survived without your intervention.
I'm also a big believer in compassionate use. So even if you have a placebo control, as soon as you see that the experimental samples are working, you treat the placebos too.
Yeah, I always thought half the people just get screwed.
I mean, there's a lot of clinical studies where that is the routine right now. When as soon as the drug starts to show the effect of the placebo group is treated too.
Okay.
At no cost to them.
Absolutely, absolutely, because it is very difficult to perform a precise controlled experiment with humans anyway, but we have to keep the goals of the experiment in mind. And if the goals are not just to find out knowledge, but to achieve an effect, improvements in health or saving someone's life, then yes, compassionate use should be the default practice. So I also wanted to ask you, James, you perform studies in crayfish populations.
Yeah.
Could you discuss your research a bit?
Most of it's preliminary, watching data, because believe it or not, there's not a lot of data on crayfish, and the stuff there is mostly centered in Europe, and even that's sparse and scattered. There's an occasional thing or migration patterns, but very few population studies. So there's actually not a lot known about them. Like, there's distributions and things and where they're supposed to be and where they're not, but it's a very unknown creature despite it being in both common use and culinary practice and scattered all over the globe. So what I'm doing is just a plain population study for just a baseline. I'm taking measurements of water quality, average length, average weight, and of course weighing each of them, and then the whole population size, and seeing if anyone wants to go from there or just continue my work on to my graduate studies.
How much is known about the lifespans of crayfish?
I was just
I don't know. I've looked it up, and there probably is somewhere, but I have not seen a single reference to their age online.
Well, if they're all related to lobsters, and you're interested, I would love to do a collaboration with you. If you can provide us some tissues without hurting the crayfish, provide us some tissues that we can culture cells from, we can do things like measure telomerase activity, measure telomere lengths, find out if they ever reach a Hayflick limit. Just because lobsters don't reach a Hayflick limit, they have telomeres produced in all their cells, they have enough telomere shortening. If crayfish are anything like lobsters, that would be very interesting fun.
I can bring you some lobster ones if you want.
Yeah, I don't know if we have somebody right now that could acquire the tissue from them without hurting the animal, but I don't want to pull off a leg. And, I don't like that. If there's some way that you know of somebody who knows how to stick a needle into one of them and remove tissue without harming the animal, that would be suitable. And we could do that, put an exciting PhD dissertation, that would be.
Yeah. I could ask the UC Davis lab up in Sierra Nevada College to see if I can get some, because they're already testing one of the ones, although you wouldn't be able to use that one because A, they've been dead for a while, I think, and B, they might have pestilence in them, so that wouldn't be a good baseline anyway. But
Well, let's work on it. Let's get something
yeah,
going.
okay, perfect.
Yes, well, this is an example of the kinds of possible collaborations and cross-disciplinary discourse that we encourage here at the Enlightenment Salons. And it's interesting too, in the year 2018, we have advanced far in terms of our scientific knowledge, but still not far enough. And there are still many common areas of life and of the world about which we know surprisingly little. And Bill, as you mentioned, the serious study of lifespans of any non-human organisms really began in the mid-19th century. And many of the longest-lived organisms were born before that time. So even not enough time has passed to truly ascertain the maximum lifespans of which those species are capable. I read recently there were studies of Greenland sharks showing that they could live to 400 or 500 years.
And they don't never get cancer, which is also just correlated with telomeres. I think the sharks, or several species of sharks have been, some of the fish that I was talking about, have been shown to have telomeres producing all their cells in the telomere short. The sharks were previously already known to be very cancer resistant. So a lot of products right now are shark extracts that people take to try to fight their cancer. They work, and I would be surprised if they work, because humans are so different from sharks, but at least the mechanism of action would help us design better ways to do it. And if it's just lengthening telomeres, shoot, I'm already doing that. So
Yes, and wouldn't it be nice to have an entire society where gaining that kind of knowledge is seen as a priority for the culture, just like we learn in elementary school what are the planets of the solar system, how do you do basic arithmetic, who were the presidents of the United States or famous historical figures in whatever country we happen to be brought up in. Wouldn't it be great in basic educational systems to have lessons on lifespans and what are the lifespans of various organisms? What do we know? What don't we know? How can humans potentially use this knowledge to live longer and healthier?
I wish I had had that kind of education, but I didn't need it because I was so focused on it anyway that it would have really moved me ahead forward. The big problem with schools for younger children and stuff like that is they don't emphasize healthy lifestyles. And your lifestyle begins when you're a child. Even Sandra Kaufman's book talked about the number of fat cells that a person has in their body changes with your lifestyle up until you're about, I think she said 13 years old. Then it stops. Then that's the rest of your life, you have the same number of fat cells. And it never changes. I mean, here's a reason why people might be wanting to focus more on lifestyle of the younger kids. I'm a big fan of that book of Sandra Kaufman, so that's interesting. And you guys got to read it.
And it's interesting too, one of my distinguishing projects in the field of life extension activism has been Death is Wrong, the illustrated children's book on life extension. And I try to inject a bit of that early childhood education by discussing long-lived organisms. And I do mention the bristlecone pines and Turritopsis dornii jellyfish, which are dissimilar to humans. But the point that I make is, if these organisms are capable of having these lifespans, then there's not some immutable law of nature that says no organism can, that humans cannot for whatever reason. That is to say, it's just a matter of figuring out our biology and how to control it and how to prevent the damage that occurs over the course of a lifetime. But if more kids were exposed to those ideas and were interested in doing further research, the entire field could advance dramatically. I think if there were an updated edition of Death is Wrong published today, I would include expanded content, including, for instance, a mention of the Greenland sharks, as well as research advances that have been made over the past 5 years. And I think if children were motivated to find out more about this, we could see a cultural shift.
You see better lifestyles, and you can see better scientists, and you can see a better, just all around the world future. Yeah. And Johnny, you're a pioneer in this area. With that book that you've written, it's like, I don't know if anybody else has ever written a book like that, but I would encourage you to write more books on the subject as soon as possible and get them more used at schools and stuff. So I think it's very important. And if I can help with that, I will.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm honored by your good words and by that offer, and definitely something to explore in the coming years. It's interesting too because this field keeps rapidly evolving. So new startups get formed, new research breakthroughs get announced every year, and even in animals that are dissimilar to humans like mice, scientists are finding ways to reverse the symptoms of certain diseases and to lengthen lifespans. One of the things that could help, I think, is to have more purely lifespan-oriented studies on any organisms, including mice. What I see in some of the recent studies is there is this cutoff point, so scientists will say, well, we prefer staging, but then they don't monitor the mice after the cutoff point. What if they continue to monitor them?
But there are studies where they had monitored all the way until the mouse died. Where Blasco and Ron both did that, even though they did have to sacrifice a few of the mice to look at the brain. They cut off the head and pull out the brain. But they did let them go until they died and recorded the day that they did die. There's one thing that a lot of people seem to overlook when they talk about mouse studies, and that's Richard Cutler. Dr. Richard Cutler published papers, I want to say 40 years ago, on oxidative stress and stuff, and he found out that humans have 100 times the level of superoxide dismutase as mice do. It's 100-fold higher. And so humans don't actually have the oxidative stress problems that mice do, and that's why mice tend to succumb to oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction.
So, another subject that I would like us to venture into in light of recent events is that of privacy, and in particular data privacy, which will become increasingly important. There was a recent major Facebook breach where essentially there was a vulnerability in the view as feature where you could view your Facebook profile as a friend or a member of the public and see what they would see. But apparently that feature had a loophole in it where an external party could use the view as feature to actually access somebody else's account, access somebody's private account information. So I was actually one of the people who Facebook had automatically logged out as a precaution, and essentially it was a good idea at the time to reset one's password and make sure that if one's data had been accessed, that the hackers couldn't log back into one's account. Then, very recently, Facebook published a feature on its help center saying what data it suspects might have been accessed from one's own account. And I saw that yesterday. Fortunately, none of my private information was accessed according to Facebook, so they logged me out as a precaution. But I encourage others to take a look, especially if they had been logged out in the past. There was also an announcement recently by Google that in the Google Plus social network, they had inadvertently allowed some of the developers of the applications that use Google Plus to access people's private profile information. And generally, that would be information like names, email addresses, locations, not financial information as far as they're concerned. And they're not aware of any actual misuse of that information. But because Google Plus has struggled to acquire as wide of a user base as Facebook, they essentially used that disclosure as an excuse to announce that Google Plus was shutting down. And I don't think that's quite their genuine reason for shutting it down, but suffice it to say these data breaches have been happening quite frequently, and they have been high profile, and they have resulted in a lot of adverse public reaction, to the point that a severe enough data breach can bring down a social network. And that speaks to the importance of protecting and safeguarding individual privacy, something that the Transhumanist Party strongly stands for, because as we increasingly utilize connected devices, connected computers, phones, smart home devices, sensors, in the future, that's going to be an even more significant part of our lives. If we have devices embedded in our bodies, medical devices, for instance, or devices that could enhance our brain function. What Ray Kurzweil, whom I interviewed at RadFest, was talking about, the neurocortex in the cloud. There are going to need to be extremely good safeguards to make sure there's no unauthorized access to tools that essentially become vital, literally vital, to the functioning of human life. So this is an ongoing discussion, of course, but I would be interested in all of your thoughts about individual privacy and data ownership, and how we can move from the status quo to a world in which people don't have to worry about somebody illegitimately acquiring their most private details.
Now, It's very complicated depending on what's possible because, well, there's been a lot of preliminary work, such as being to be able to identify what people are thinking about, not necessarily exactly what, but a certain concept with some consistency. There's no real data on whether or not it's actually possible for a full brain uplink yet, or something like this. So that one I will put my preconceptions aside, besides the fact that I do not want my brain hooked up to the internet, at least not directly at all, to the side until more data affirms that. But when it comes to data privacy, like, say, personal rights things, I'm an absolutist on the subject, meaning that they should have to disclose what they're doing with your data, where they're putting your data, or you should be able to say, hey, I don't want you to using my data. And whether that doesn't allow you to use the site, that's totally fine, but it should be completely transparent with this. Like, it's why I deleted my profile with 23andMe, because I did that like a few years back and got the raw data, but after a point I'm hearing some of these breaches and things like that. It's like, no. So did deletion, and I'm still 2 years away from them actually deleting it because there's some archaic law that had to do with the Human Genome Project that was passed in like the late 80s that said you have to keep your data for like 4 years. You point to it and I'm like, crap. But after that, I'm going to be very, very cautious going forward with my personal genetic data.
Oh, indeed, indeed. Now, I'll point out, when Google Plus announced its impending shutdown in about 10 months, they also linked users to a service they have called Google Takeout, where it's possible to actually export to your computer in a zip file or multiple zip files all of the data that Google has on you across multiple services. So I actually did that in preparation for the shutdown of Google Plus because I didn't want to lose my content. I don't post anything particularly private or sensitive on Google Plus, but I've posted a lot of links to articles and videos, a few pictures over the years, and I don't want to lose that. Maybe now that I have all of that information, I could recreate it on my own website and have an archive of my Google Plus activity, just so that that is not lost simply because of a decision by the platform. But Bill, I know you had some thoughts on individual privacy.
For years I've had this feeling that someday in the near future, we are not going to have any privacy.
I agree.
It's something that I think that's the world is evolving in that direction, that we're going to be knowing everything about everybody. And I think we're going to be really surprised to find out how common certain traits are that people usually keep quiet and stuff like that. And this is going to be a whole world change. There's going to be people accepting things that they didn't accept before because it turns out 90% of the people were doing it anyway. I don't know, can't even think of examples right off the top of my head to describe it. I just think we're going to have to face the fact that in the future, there is not going to be any privacy.
I agree with you on that.
Now, at the present point, though, let me just say that before you start, I don't put anything in Facebook that's not published even on my website. So, like, my phone number and my email address are in my Facebook profile, but they're also big letters on my website. So I'm not worried about anybody. When they shut my account down and I had to restart it, I wasn't worried at all about anything that got stolen from my Facebook site.
I was gonna say, because like in the beginning, everyone kind of like lived together. There really was no like privacy a long time ago, and then there was privacy, and now it seems like there's gonna be no privacy again. It's like it goes back to what it was. Yeah, I don't see the security getting any better at preventing these breaks. I just see them happening more and more and more. And yeah, essentially you like look at someone and like there'll be like through your eye lens and like all this stuff about him. The biggest concern I had was when we were able to like read each other, people being able to read your thoughts. That's a little.
I can't wait.
I don't know about that.
Adapt to it. I mean,
I just don't know. I don't know if that should be other people's autonomy.
You sound like people 20 years ago when the World Wide Web was first being created. People said they didn't want to have anything to do with it. It'd be too complicated. We'd be communicating too much. There was going to be mostly too difficult to do. Now we can't live without it.
I mean, yeah, I know it'd be cool to like think instead of having to speak, but then like for a person to know your every thought is kind of like, because you're able to think through your thought, think what you want to say and put out there. So it's just kind of, it's an autonomy I'm not ready quite to give up.
Self-driving cars can like.
It's not going to be comfortable at the beginning, but we're all going to get.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, I'm resistant because
a self-driving car can see like a bee, like those things can see like everything, and once they're everywhere.
I can't wait for those.
Yeah.
Well,
I even
that's fine.
I heard Robert Freitas. You might know him.
I know Robert.
I watched an interview with him and Ray Kurzweil, and he's discussing about privacy and hacks with really advanced nanotechnology. And he said something really interesting, which was we're going to need to get rid of privacy. Really, that's the only way to prevent these sort of hacks or dystopian futures with nanotechnology, because you're going to need these things everywhere, in trees and inside cars and inside our human tissue, to have mass surveillance to make sure that there's no dystopian future with nanotechnology.
So I have a bit of a different perspective, and this is actually
itself a dystopian future.
Yeah, you definitely see where that goes wrong. But that's what I heard him talk about, and I think it's really important. It didn't sound like something he necessarily wanted. It sounded more like something that just was necessary for life to exist with that type of technology. But
So, this is a point of disagreement between me and Zoltan Istvan, who founded the Transhumanist Party. When he was chairman, he made certain statements about the disappearance of privacy in the future, but since I became chairman, we adopted a platform plank essentially emphasizing our support of individual privacy. And at various conferences since we've crossed paths and we've had that conversation, also in the discussion was Jose Cordero, who took a bit of an intermediate position, but Zoltan also articulated the view that he thinks privacy is becoming obsolete. I articulated the view that we need to figure out stronger protections for privacy in the technological age, not rejecting any of these technologies or ways to become interconnected, but really emphasizing the absolute individual ownership of data and the fact that while we may disclose more about ourselves than we would have in the past, we need to be the individuals who have that discretion, who choose to disclose or not to disclose, because different people are comfortable with disclosing different aspects of their lives, so it's not going to be one size fits all. But I think privacy in the future is going to be modular in the sense that we decide, we own our data, and in many cases we should get paid if somebody else uses our data for financial benefit. The social networks certainly have made a lot of money off individuals' data, but what if every time they make money, say by selling advertisements, we get a fraction of that revenue? And that could also affect individuals' incentives about what they're comfortable sharing, because there would be a much more concrete benefit-cost trade-off that people could see. So it will certainly be an interesting future, and thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts today.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I just don't believe it's going to happen. I just believe that the future is going to be where all privacy is at dawn. Not that I like the idea, but I think that's what's going to happen.
So you see, Bill, at least from the standpoint of my cultural upbringing, I very much belong to that sliver of time when the privacy of the individual was the default expectation. And it was interesting because the right to privacy was first articulated in the late 19th century. Louis Brandeis had a famous article in 1890 about the right to privacy, the right to be left alone. And this very much emerged out of the norms of the Victorian era, which had really moved societies toward what we see as contemporary middle-class life. People living in single-family homes, people having their home spaces distinguished from their workspace, people having their realms of private thoughts, which may be different from what they choose to share in public. So I am very much culturally of that time. And I would hate to see the advantages of that disappear.
No, I agree. I agree totally. Now, these people that you mentioned in the 19th century, I don't think they, when they were talking about privacy, ever envisioned what we're talking about now.
Yeah, big data.
Oh, yes. Well, back then, you could, especially if you were fairly well off, be, say, on your estate in your mansion, and yes, you could have servants, you would have people who would know certain things about you, but they wouldn't be the general public. So
You controlled who knew who didn't.
exactly.
Well, and then there was Brave New World in 1984, and numerous governments seem to be using those as instruction manuals.
Yes, and that is unfortunate, but Huxley and Orwell were prescient in their own ways about anticipating the erosion of privacy. But I think the dystopias they wrote about don't have to pass. I do think it's up to us as individuals to affect that outcome through what we accept, what we don't accept, how we use technology and the expectations we set society-wide for the use of technology, because we certainly want the benefits of interconnectedness, and if people want to share something, they should be free to share it with as many others as are willing to access that information. But at the same time, in the future, I hope we have a kind of hyper-pluralism of individual lifestyles, where those who want to keep certain things to themselves will also have the freedom to do that. In any event, thank you very much, everyone, for attending our 5th Enlightenment Salon and for an excellent discussion today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.